Guys, listen. I have the best idea. Guys, listen. I have the best idea ever. Guys, I'll put a jetpack. Guys, jetpack. I'll put a jetpack. Guys, listen here. I'll put a jetpack on a dragon. Yeah, that just happened. Welcome to The Initiative. We look at new PC games to see how well they can do in the video game market. The game we have here is Divinity Dragon Commander, created and published by Larian Studios. This, along with the upcoming game Divinity Original Sin, is intended to be a prequel to their Divinity series of RPGs. It's hard to describe what this game actually is, because this is a turn-based strategy game with a little bit of everything. Well, I guess that's a good description. Let's go with that. The story goes like this. The king was killed, your siblings are fighting for the throne, and you're the one who has to take it. And you're a dragon with a jetpack. That's awesome! The single-player campaign puts you in a command ship called the Raven. Here you interact with the people on board the ship. This includes your generals, counselors of different races, and some people doing research on stuff. For the most part, the game is a turn-based strategy game. You take control of several territories on the map, each of which generates gold and research for you, and you can have a special building that has a special ability, like the ability to build units, generating extra resources, and giving you extra cards every few turns. These cards have specific purposes. Strategy cards can be played on a territory, and combat cards can temporarily unlock technology for a single battle. On the ship, you have to deal with issues almost every turn. Sometimes you have to deal with arguments between generals, other times you have to vote on political issues that your counselors bring to your attention. I've noticed that these are based on real-world issues like healthcare, gay marriage, and marijuana usage. I have to say, it's kind of amusing to hear what the Undead have to say about getting high. These issues affect your relationship between the different races, and in turn affects your combat effectiveness when fighting in a particular race's territory. The research points you generate every turn is used to unlock new units and upgrades. In the single-player campaign, most of these are unavailable until you get to a certain point in the story, so there's no rushing to get the big, powerful units. You can also use these research points on your dragon abilities, and these become very useful in situations where you don't have enough units. Again, most of these are unavailable until later in the story. The combat itself is kind of weird because it takes everything you've done in the turn-based phase of the game and applies it in a real-time strategy fashion. Your relationship with the dominant race on the territory will determine your food cap, that is, the maximum amount of units you can have on the map. The units you bring into the territory beforehand are the units you start the battle with. Outside of that, it's a real-time strategy game that involves capturing bases. Recruitment Centers generates recruits, which is the resource you use to construct buildings and train new units. You'll notice that you can only build the units you've researched or unlocked with a combat card, so when you take into account all the effects and stats applied beforehand, there will be instances where playing this segment is impossible to win. You have the choice to auto-resolve the battle with one of your generals. They do provide bonuses at a price, but I don't find them to be worth it. If I want to auto-resolve something, I do it without the bonuses because it's free. You can also summon yourself onto the field. The game now turns into a third-person shooter. WASD controls, breathe fire on enemy units, and use your jetpack to avoid projectiles. You have special abilities you can use, and you select them beforehand. Like with your units, you have to unlock these with research points or use a combat card. In this mode, you still have limited control over your units and your bases. Seemed pretty cool at first, until you realize just how weak you actually are. You need enough units to tank the damage for you. Honestly, the whole RTS segment feels weak. Rather than a third-person shooter mechanic, I would have liked the dragon to be a hero unit in my army, maintain control of everything from a top-down perspective instead of forcing me to use multiple sets of controls. I get the idea that the dragon is supposed to be you, so you're supposed to lose a degree of control when you enter the field, but from a gameplay perspective, it feels clunky to the point where you're forced to decide, okay, do I use my dragon abilities, or do I want full control of my army? Do I need to micro my units? Do I need to macro up back at home? There are many occasions where it really feels like you need to do everything at the same time. Like I said before, it's a turn-based strategy game with a little bit of everything. RTS, third-person action, adventure game elements, card game elements. One thing's for sure, they're doing something fresh and original here, and it has a good amount of content. It even has multiplayer with LAN and online play, either as a full turn-based multiplayer campaign, or a single RTS skirmish. How the game mechanics will hold up is yet to be determined, but we can still analyze how the game will do in the video game market. I believe the success of this game will depend on its initial reception. It's going to snowball in one direction or another. From what I've been seeing, it's only had a fair amount of coverage. Reviews from the big gaming websites are out, all of which are giving top marks to the game. There doesn't seem to be much discussion outside of the Steam forums or other places specifically about the game, so that's a factor in its longevity. So far, I'm liking the post-release support. Many of the initial bugs have already been fixed within a couple of days, so give it a few weeks and they'll all be gone. Just make sure to let the developers know. They're very active on their Steam forums, so that's the easiest place to get their attention. In a few months' time, again, the status of the game will depend on its initial reception. You need a good player base to keep the game going, otherwise the game will simply die off. The multiplayer campaigns are the big thing here. Without a community behind it, this feature doesn't really exist. Custom campaigns are also a big thing for its longevity. It's basically the single-player campaign with story-driven elements randomized on a multiplayer map of your choosing, so this effectively becomes a replayable single-player campaign. These are the two big things that would keep the game going. I highly doubt there will be modding or any form of user-generated content. The game had a really weird development cycle. It originally had controller support because of the dragon combat, and there were plans for a console version later on. But as the game evolved and became increasingly complex, they scrapped those plans. You can tell by the user interface that a controller will make it difficult to do anything, really. That's just one of the deviations from the original plans. Point is, this was never built from the ground up for mod support, and every territory in these maps has their own unique RTS terrain, so making a single map would be a difficult task for modders anyway. If anything, new content would be in the form of DLC. I think this is a solid game here, despite the weaker RTS segment. It does a fairly good job at combining elements from other genres. I highly recommend this if you're into turn-based strategy games, or if you just want to try something new. It's $40, which I think is a fair price for what you get. The sheer amount of features and content it has, the way it combines everything together, and you're a dragon with a jetpack. I think it's worth the $40 price tag, but you can always put this on a list and wait for the price to drop. We'll see how well this game does in a few months. As always, thanks for watching.